All right, it's part three, back by popular demand. Mostly demand of people getting the podcast last time and spending too much time talking about certain tasks or certain aspects of it, and us wanting to make big trades afterwards. So, um, here we are for part three of our league-wide trade extravaganza, where we're going through and finding deals and potential ideas for each and every team, finishing up with the NFC West, and then talking about a couple things that happened since our last podcast. Just a couple small trades that might have an impact on the season. Anyways, talking about big trades, doing big things, we got RJ here.
Hello. All right.
And his big
NF
wall of magic cards.
Yep.
All right.
NFC West tonight.
NFC West. So as mentioned, there were some minor trades that went down over the weekend. I think we'll start with the West, and then that dovetails quite nicely with some of those deals. But again, we'll start with the 49ers. So taking a quick look through this, quarterback is definitely an area of challenge. Running back, I'll give it incomplete right now just because not quite sure where that's going to be. Much like I've joked in the past, the 107 is the ideal receiver spot to take a pick. The 49ers, it may be whoever he's taking at receiver, you may want to stay away from, either because of injury or otherwise concerns. Tight end, he's doubled up there. We'll see what Gronk does in Tampa without Tom. And then some quality defensive pieces, but maybe lacking some depth. Big focus for me is I think I don't know. It may be time to hit the reset button on some of these defensive pieces. I think if he moves a year or so early on Patrick Queen, he could get a pretty nice return, and then use that to start rebuilding the offense. I think based off his performance last year and expected continued performance in Baltimore, he'd be able to get his pick that he invested back in there and more. Otherwise, it's probably looking like a Michael Gallup type deal to see if he can bring back something in the quarterback realm and maybe make do with everything else. I don't know. What do you think, RJ? Is this a tear it down and rebuild, or is this a find a way to get a quarterback without giving up too much?
So I really like the idea of moving Patrick Queen, like you had said, breaking him down into multiple defensive assets, or like a quality pick and a defensive asset would be good. What pick does he have right now? You said 107.
So no, 107 is was the Cardinals pick, but that moved over the weekend.
Okay.
Um,
They have 110.
okay.
So they're still in play for potentially the third quarterback taken. Which I don't think that's necessarily going to be a terrible spot to get a quarterback.
Mhm.
So yeah, flesh that out. Maybe repurpose some wide receivers into running backs, just like through moving things. That's about it. Like the team's fine, but year in year out, we always say that there is somebody, if they put any effort into it, can take the NFC West, and this is a team that's like the rest of them, relatively close to being able to compete. They just need to address those holes.
Right. And again, it's I'm trying to see if there's a good team with multiple starting quarterbacks that may be in kind of a rebuild mode here, but I think that's kind of a too soon to tell on some of the stuff with a lot of the open jobs still needing to be filled. Again, the Chiefs probably have two starters, but not 100% sure what's going to happen with Houston. Um,
I
but
mean, as much as I hate to say it, like Broncos wouldn't be a bad one to approach. Like to gamble on having Wentz and Trubisky, that would be fine. Still not a fan of Mitch, but it seems like his name does get thrown about as like a potential starter. Um, so throwing a high pick Broncos way, maybe a little extra for both of those quarterbacks wouldn't be unreasonable.
yeah, and just from thematic and historical reasons, this probably shouldn't and can't happen. But if he takes the 110 and offers it to Seahawks for Zach Wilson, is that something that intrigues you? Like if you're in the hunt for the third quarterback or probably the second or third running back or third or fourth receiver or something like that, or the first defensive player off the board, is that intriguing enough to take a chance on Wilson, who had ups and downs during this past season. And Seahawks has already said he's in a rebuild, so he wants to tear it down. And that I think 110 is probably about the right price for Zach right now.
Yeah, I think that would be perfectly fine. I think a lot of people have a lot of concerns with Wilson or just the Jets starting quarterback spot in general.
Yep.
But I don't think that's unreasonable, especially since he was the 104 last year.
Mm-hmm. And still, having him down here, moving down to the 110 is probably not the worst thing, especially for a quarterback you didn't take. And for San Francisco, that gives him 3 more years of a cheap Wilson. If it turns out, fantastic. If it doesn't, not the worst situation. At least you're getting starter points, and you can build from there without having to give up anything major. Maybe move off one of the tight ends. Who knows? But you're probably not getting a ton for either until Aaron Rodgers figures out what he's doing and where he's going. All right, let's move over to the Cardinals. This team looks a little bit different than when we started the offseason, I would say.
Yeah, they moved DeAndre Hopkins, that's for sure.
Yep, moved Hopkins in a deal to get Aaron Jones, and then moved picks to get in a position to get Joe Burrow. So now the Cardinals have the ideal Cincinnati stack of Burrow and Chase, which is not a bad thing to have. Still has the potential upside if Mason Rudolph wins the Pittsburgh quarterback job. We'll see what ends up going on there. Aaron Jones as a running back one with some good secondary options and Madison, Wayne Gallman, folks like that. Receivers looking a little bit thin at the moment, but that's something that can definitely be addressed. And again, he's in a good position with about $41 million of cap left to fill 12 spots. I think, like you said, any team can win the West with a little bit of effort. I think there's still some tweaks to be made, but the Cardinals had to re-cement themselves as a front runner after this.
Yeah. So I think they're in a situation where they want to. I don't know what they want to move, but they need some defensive ends. They need to get some clarity. They have none on the roster, and I probably would want at least one quality one before free agency, so you at least have your defensive end one taken care of. I wouldn't. The team looks fantastic, but I wouldn't feel comfortable going in without addressing defensive end at all.
Yeah, and the fact they have none, they've got to do something. So, yeah, adding one I think would be helpful, but nonetheless, I think he's in a position that with I would say 2 solid linebackers, Raekwon likely coming back and having some form of role with New England or otherwise, and then kind of going the volume approach at those positions, primarily wide receiver and D end could work. The problem is everyone's going to be hunting for D ends in this, so it's going to be tough to get a quality one and not pay 7, 8, 9 million. And he's got 40 million, but he doesn't have enough to get a bunch of 7, 8, $9 million D ends. He's got enough to get 1 or 2, but then he's got to build depth from there.
So as much as it may feel like a mild regression for the team, I would probably try to move Gerald Everett. Just the fact that it's a higher end tight end. He is a pricey contract,
Mm-hmm.
but with moving him adds a little bit more flexibility. You get around $60 million just to do things with. You can pay a little bit more for defensive ends or completely flesh out your defensive ends in free agency. As long as you get some type of a productive tight end, and then maybe go hunting for one pre-draft with the 210 or something of that nature, or maybe just take the best tight end available at 210.
Yeah, I think either one's a good option.
But I think
again,
Everett's the only piece that Nothing feels great on this roster. Like the idea of getting rid of anything. Maybe Alexander Madison, but like other than that, Everett seems to be the only like logical one because, as we've said before, tight end is more of a luxury in this league.
Yeah, it feels a little unfinished. He did move his future first, so this is not a team that's going to tank. Um, but again, it's tough because he's consolidated among the three stud pieces on offense, which he's going to need if he wants to win the West. But at the same time, there's definitely things to address. So um, I don't know. At some point, you just kind of say, "Hey, I've got Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and Aaron Jones, and I figure the rest out." But again, I could see going a couple of different ways with this. Those are definitely assets that if he wanted to break those down right now, he could probably field a more competitive team. But I can get the idea of saying, "Hey, I've got good young rookies on cheap deals. I'll figure everything else out."
Right.
All right, moving down to the Rams. Baker, again, I think his future is a little bit undetermined, but I can't see the Browns really moving off of him this year. DeAndre Swift looked good in action as well as DJ Dallas last year, so that's a shallow but good running back core. Waddle and Brown, and then Pringle obviously getting a good amount of show. So three main skill positions, high quality, and then some good depth. Tight end is a little bit more murky, I would say. Tanyan hitting free agency, coming off the ACL injury, I think is going to be interesting to his value. I think he's definitely got an upside if Roger stays in Green Bay and he stays in Green Bay. Otherwise, it's going to be tough to gauge what that valuation is on a player like that. And after that, he's got a lot of sort of upside, maybe tight ends. Mo Cox had his moments, but probably is not someone to rely on. And then outside of Christian Wilkins, the defense needs some time and some TLC. Pierre Paul is solid. Wormley is solid. Very good linebacking core, but kind of depth needed in the front seven for sure. So I'd say, yeah, Rams definitely remain in the front runner in the division, but some TLC at tight end, probably another quality D end, and then some offensive depth is the main focus here.
Yeah, I really like this defensive end group, just because it feels like a best ball defensive end group.
Mm-hmm.
You need two of them to start. I don't know. Ideally, you probably want Jerry Hughes of like 3 years ago, and then
Mm-hmm.
that defensive end group is solid. So maybe he's
That'd be
looking to
nice.
pick one up. Yeah, maybe he's looking to pick one up in free agency. Because like I don't know if you want to spend any more like I don't know if you want to move any other assets into defensive end at this point. But like I do agree, if you're moving anything, it's probably for a tight end. I would actually look at CJ Mosley just because like known production, um is a fairly reasonable contract, massive amount of points that he's carrying around. So you might as well like make if you can turn him into a lesser but consistent and productive tight end to like fill out that room. I like that idea. Or like a mediocre wide receiver, but I think he's on the right path with the wide receivers. It's not deep, but like Pringle's amazing for best ball. The other two obviously score enough to be quality best ball players. So like yeah, the only thing that's like an extreme like need right now is tight end because I really don't like the idea of Tanyan being a tight end one on a team. Maybe pair Tanyan and CJ Mosley and go hunting for a larger tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably makes some sense. Trying to see teams that could part with a tight end here. Buccaneers might be an interesting option. Try and send something to him for something like Draymond and Degura. Kind of hedge your bets on the Green Bay tight end situation. Um, get a better tight end. Again, it's a question of what would have to go back to pull that. I'd probably say that's early second, late first valuation for a package like that. But I don't know if he's got a first to give this year, if he wants to start dipping into 23 already, or if he has already.
Yeah, that would seem reasonable to me.
Yeah, otherwise it's like going for Saints, but Saints would actually have to respond to a deal. Anyways, last but not least, we have the Seahawks. Luke is in full teardown mode here, and he's mentioned as much. He's been acquiring capital and young players all off season. He's got a couple of youthful pieces at each position. Zach Wilson, as we mentioned earlier, CEH, in whatever role he's in with Kansas City. I don't think anybody can tell you that right now. Terrace Marshall having a less than stellar rookie season. Chenault having some issues breaking out. Fryermuth definitely shined at times in Pittsburgh, and then defense, not a lot to talk about outside of Isaiah Simmons. Um, Big thing here is he can absolutely turn some of these offensive pieces into more capital or more developmental pieces, and I think that's what he's got to do. It's move Wilson, move Ceh, move probably even Fryermuth. Team will probably give you a first for him right now and say, okay, I'm gonna build, and this is gonna be my team, and we'll use the 23 draft as kind of the basis for that because no one's really moved into I'll call it the prime tanking position right now. Um, I think that's probably up for grabs. Not that I'm encouraging teams to tank, but I think Seahawks can be the first mover, get himself into that spot, and kind of make sure that he's going to be in that top three, top five range. But get himself a number of shots at the class next year to really build with. And then if he gets to a situation where the hype grows and he gets a Patriots type chance to roll the dice during the year, then he's got the ammo to do something like that.
Yeah, this would be like an interesting team to take that approach, similar to something like what I did last year. Maybe trade to lessen your team, get like whatever picks that you can right now, put yourself in the driver's seat to be the 101, 102, and just continue to move like the smaller assets to kind of better your positions. And like even if you can get some picks this year, like get those, go into draft time, see if you like while you're on the clock, if you can move them for a 2023 of equal value and maybe a little bit more. So
Yeah.
like I really do like that idea. I agree with the breaking down CEH. So like that would be so like we kind of know like Wilson's probably worth like another top 10 pick. Like just, moving him for the time being. But like CEH is I'm interested to see what his return actually would be. Um
Well, yeah, it's you want to sell the upside, and it is the off season, and he is on his rookie deal still there. So, um, all things are possible in the off season. So, I imagine you'd want to get top 15, top 20 pick value for him. The question is, since Reed basically did turn it into a bit of a timeshare last year, um, kind of just rolling the hot hand, does he change
right.
next year? Does he go back and say, okay, great, CH is my guy, thank you, Daryl Williams, thank you, Jarek McKinnon, now go back to the bench? Or is it, hey, hot hand worked for me last year, let's try it again?
Right. Yeah, like he's like the one really nice name at running back that it just I don't know, his position got cloudy.
Yeah.
And it's like I feel that he has good value. Like don't get me wrong, he hasn't tumbled to a below first round value, but it's just like I thought it was an interesting conversation because he carries around like the 104 type of like the draft capital used for him, and it's like unfortunately he's like one of the few like the RB1 coming out that didn't I don't know turn into more value.
Well, he did,
Like
and he did well enough last year, and not last year, the year before.
right.
Um, Again, he's not the same kind of player.
No.
Like a Trent Richardson situation where he produced well his rookie season. He probably got into, I think, of the top 20, 24, probably RB1 or RB2 starter level, and then is starting to fade a little bit. The question is, can he turn it around and rebound, or is he going to continue down that path? Who knows? But yeah, I would say if I had to value him right now, it'd be at a late first or early second. in terms of what I'd be willing to pay for a player like that. So the better option here may be to go to a team that needs something like that. Like if I still had the 114,
Mhm.
throw Fryermuth and CEH at me for 114 and like a second or something like that. See if you can get a deal like that where you get yourself another first round pick, which is earlier than you would get otherwise. Um, you maximize the value for Fryermuth and then get yourself a secondary, like, top 60, top 80 pick in there as well. I think that's the kind of deal that makes a lot of sense for a team like this.
Yeah, that seems smart. Like that type of a haul really like puts you in a situation where you're like making that team yours.
Right. And again, it would be focusing on like adding CEH to a sell high asset. Again, the main one there is I would say Fryermuth and maybe Isaiah Simmons. Like, could you throw a CEH and Simmons to get like 120 or something? Uh, it's you know you're probably not going to get an easy first for both, but you can probably get into the top 20 range if you put both of them in a deal.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So that's the last four teams. We did it. Just took us 3 podcasts and 4 hours of jibba jabba to get there. So that's your first run at the teams this offseason. Won't be the last, I can tell you that much. Um, we will be talking about these teams again because they're going to change. Trades, free agency, draft, it's all going to flip everything on its head. I'm not the only one who likes to rotate his entire team every offseason. And it may not be to that degree, but I don't expect the sort of the teams we saw as front runners in these divisions to stay the front runners, just in terms of how things are moving around. And unmovable assets are movable. And speaking of which, we had two unmovable assets move over the weekend. I'd say of high value. RJ, I'll save our trade for a second because I'd rather talk about other people first. But the big deal of the weekend, I would say, about two biggest deals of the weekend. Never mind. Never mind. I'll just go in order. I've changed my mind. On the podcast host, I can do that. So let's start with us, and then we'll dive into the other four deals that happened the weekend / yesterday. So our deal, you finally move Trey Lance. I think you've been trying to move either the 101 or Trey for the better part of the offseason, and we finally settled on a agreeable value. I got Trey in the 420. Nice. You get Jaron Reed, the 114, the 123, and Washington's future first. So 3 first-round picks and a quality D tackle for Lance, who, again, probably is worth a top 5 pick this year at the very least, and a 4th-round pick. So, again, I think from our perspective, I think it's a win-win. I'm very happy to have Trey Lance. I'm wearing a 49er sweatshirt, so my fandom is pretty well understood, I'd say, from the audience here. But I think he's the quarterback of the future and has Josh Allen type upside. I'm not saying he's going to get there immediately, but I think he fits that system, and his mobility raises his floor. So I'm excited to have him on a cheap contract for a few more years. And again, losing Jaron Reed isn't great, but I still have 2 other D tackles I can use at that position. And who knows, maybe the 420 will give me another depth shot at something like that. Do you want to talk about your side?
Yeah. A cheap defensive tackle that I can just throw on my roster, and I don't have to. I don't feel the necessity to go out and buy a larger, more desirable defensive tackle. Now I can kind of build that position out like a best ball roster would want to.
Mm-hmm.
114. I mean, I know. Like it was mentioned that I probably should have asked for 108, and maybe they're right. Maybe the conversations would have went completely different.
I would have
It won't.
countered if you came for 108.
Yeah, understandable. And I think at that point we're probably talking about 2 picks, and then I think the conversation dies there. Because I think I wanted I wanted 3 first-round picks, whether it be for the 101 or Trey Lance. I wasn't gonna have both of them rostered. I'm not gonna take a whole bunch of gambles on a whole bunch of young quarterbacks, especially when in the past week or so I've picked up a 28-year-old wide receiver and a 30-something-year-old tight end. Like, sorry, my window got a little bit smaller for the time being. So like I don't have the time to gamble on two quarterbacks. I'd rather gamble on one for when all those old guys that I just picked up retire. 114 is going to buy me a wide receiver. Like in most classes, I don't know if that's going to be a good one, but like 114 is probably going to be a stud wide receiver in this class. I'm pretty sure there's about 10 of them. Like if you really dig into the draft class, there's about 10 of them that most people really like. 123 is going to buy me because there's an overabundance of wide receivers. It's still going to buy me a high-end defensive player or a running back in the second tier. And like I don't like the second tier of running backs, but it's a somewhat late first round pick that I can acquire. I can acquire a still an offensive talent, a young offensive talent, or I could end up flipping it for an old guy. And then I have another piece that I can in season move, and that was the thing that I like. Why I went for 2023 pick over trying to ask you for a later. Like if I'm not mistaken, you have like 129 things like that this
Yeah.
year. I get to go into the year with another first round pick that if I deem necessary, like if I'm doing well enough, I have three first round picks to start buying stuff in season before the deadline.
Right.
And like just having that having that ability is fantastic. So I love the move for myself. I am the one that offered it, so I'm more than happy with what I got back, and like that was kind of my mindset on it.
Cool. So enough about us. Let's talk about some other teams here. Shortly after that, another big deal goes down. Patriots has been shopping Amon Ra for probably a couple of weeks now, and finally got a deal he liked. Moving Amon Ra, Travis Gibson, Jerome Baker in the 301 for Miles Sanders, Daniel Hunter, Anthony Walker, 414 and a future fourth. This is one of those that I was just shocked. It was the first domino in the wait, that player's moving off of that team. You have a young pass rushing D end on a decent contract with a huge longtime Vikings fan. Um, I didn't think Hunter was ever moving, and here we go. He's now on a new team. New England had prioritized improving their D end room, and definitely did so. I'd say with this trade. Um, Adding another running back in Miles Sanders is probably a good safe move. The problem now is that receiving core is in trouble and starting to. Again, New England's never going to be done trading. I think he's got the trading bug the same way we have. So I'm not willing to make any kind of final assessments about the team, but I think in this case he definitely paid a price to get the DN he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, New England traded for Miles Sanders January 11th of this year, then traded him away in February, and then by the end of February had reacquired him from his fourth team of the offseason. Um, so we continue with the sentiment that people don't want Miles Sanders.
Well,
Like,
again, I think there's a lot of uncertainty there too.
yeah,
What does Philadelphia do next year? I think they obviously keep him, but do they feature him? Is he a running back by committee? If he's in the committee, is he even the first running back? Gainwell showed pretty well last year, so a lot to figure out and unpack in that running back room. Um, but again, if he lives up to his potential, like that's a hell of a steal. The question now becomes as he rotates things. He moved off the 301 and got back a couple of fours. Moved off the Jerome Baker contract and really filled that space with the Sanders and Hunter contracts. So, kind of what's the next move here? I'd say he's probably looking pretty good at the DN position. Is that something that he continues to prioritize, or does he say, "Hey, I've got Phillips, I've got Hunter, that's good enough. Let me go focus on something else."
I mean, I feel like that, like those two defensive ends are fine. I think you tell yourself at this point you can find one in free agency. Especially let's hope that he just hasn't looked at the free agent class and hasn't realized that it's garbage. Um, But yeah, we'll go with that. Don't trade with any more. I would probably just look to acquire some. This linebacker needs to be filled out. Like it, if you're moving something, that needs the attention at this point.
Yep.
Other than that, the roster's pretty nice.
Yeah. All
I
right,
lo-
and then go ahead.
I love picking up Chin. That's gonna be another trade that we talk about. But like I like shedding that Collins contract.
Yep. So we'll get to that, but the third, you know, player I didn't think was really going anywhere anytime soon, that did on Monday morning. I think the deal was agreed to over Sunday night into Monday morning, but Ravens giving up Joe Burrow and Logan Ryan for Jimmy Garoppolo, the 107, and Arizona's future first. So Arizona gets to pair Burrow with Chase, as we were talking about earlier. Logan Ryan's been a productive D back wherever he's been recently. Um, Ravens backfills his quarterback with Jimmy, who is rumored to get a starting job someplace. And then, uh, a 107 and a future first that from the state of the NFC West could end up in the teens next year. So um, I could see the Ravens either sitting on that and just kind of saying let it build in value as the hype train grows, or flipping that and say, hey, it's got top 15 upside. Let me get another quality piece to defend his third place or improve on his third place crown.
So I don't know. I look at Trey Lance bringing in 3 first rounders, and I look at Burrow, who, in my opinion, is probably worth a little bit more than Lance at this point.
Yeah,
Even though Lance's hype is out of this world at this point, um, and then I question if that is a good enough return. So 107 is most definitely going to get you one of those studs, but what is Jimmy worth right now? And it's like I
I'd say a
I
late first on that contract.
okay, that's not unreasonable.
For the
Um
107, a decent first next year, and then a late first in terms of the player, I think is probably fine.
yeah. So I think my only issue is I think Burrow is probably worth slightly more. And like
Yeah,
adding Logan Ryan to that, just I don't know if it feels great. But then
yeah,
when you think about it, I also do love the move for Ravens, um, not from a value standpoint, but from what he can do with that stuff. He gets Garoppolo back, who, if he finds a job, which as of right now, it's pretty safe to expect him to at least be somewhere. He's going to
yeah,
be a starter somewhere. So you get a starting quarterback back. You have a top 10 pick to go, buy yourself probably that like stud wide receiver to actually make that wide receiver group look good. And then you have another pick um, for same idea like I'm doing with Washington. If you feel that you either need that final little push to win the division or to make it to the playoffs or something like that, he has another first round pick that he can dangle in front of somebody. And hopefully, Arizona stumbles, at least for the Ravens, so that they can dangle it and, hopefully try to sell it off as a bottom 15 pick.
yeah. I mean, maybe you take the Cardinals pick and Zach Ertz and go see if you can buy yourself Ceh and Fryermuth. I think that would make a lot of sense for that team. But again, these are the things you can do when you've got a pick like that.
So Ertz is another one. Do we believe that Ertz in Arizona, like that we saw in Arizona, is going to stay that at least for a year or two?
I don't know. I think it's the right time to sell if you're going to move him.
Okay.
Because you're either moving because I think if there's a drinking game, this is definitely one of those lines of mine that's on the drinking game. It's I'd rather be the year early than a year late.
Hmm.
Um, he's he just got traded to a team that is trying to figure out its quarterback position. It probably ends up being nothing, but he showed good camaraderie with Kyler and good connection with Kyler. So you know I think this is the time to move him. I think Seahawks has the ability to kind of hold him and flip him to a team who wants him. If things are going the right way, probably get a good second round pick for him. But then get that coveted future first. That again, Cardinals has a lot of work to do, and it's going to be tough for him to be a playoff team without breaking something down or going and dipping further into the pick cash that he has. So now I just got to figure out, do I move the pick now with an implied value of probably a mid first rounder, or do I wait and see if someone stumbles and sell a top 10 and let some of the hype build for 2023 around the quarterbacks, around the running backs, and stuff like that, and then move it at that point. I can see either one being a good solution, but I would expect him to take it shopping now and see what the return is for it.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
All right, next one, definitely a consolidation move by Bucks, moving Zacchaeus, Weatherly, and Gillespie for Michael Carter. Not that one, the other one, the safety. Quality safety on a very affordable contract on his rookie deal. Buccaneers saves a good chunk of change as a result, and gets probably the better safety. Maybe not as good of a chunk of change as I thought. I thought some of those players had a higher cap hit than they do. It's just kind of a consolidation and differentiation. Titans needed to build out some depth, I think, on that team based off of having to pay what he's paying Kirk Cousins this year. So I think it's a good deal for both teams. And then after getting Carter, Titans was able to make Jeremy Chin expendable, moving him and Taron Johnson for AJ Terrell, Landon Collins, and Elohi Gilman. So I don't know if this is one of those where he had that Patriots deal on the hook before he made the first deal. But consolidating some depth, actually adding depth in both deals, and still getting probably a good number of safety options there, where he's got 3 decent safeties at this point. Makes a lot of sense.
So the first one of those moves, when I first see it, I hate it because I'm like, why is Titans giving up Michael Carter, the running back? It's a terrible deal. And I pull it up and I look at it and I realize that it's Michael Carter, the safety. And I'm like, I hate this deal now. And then I realized like what Stephen Weatherly and Zacchaeus and Gillespie did last year, and like I finally realized that Michael Carter had a very productive year at safety, and I'm back to liking the Michael Carter side, even though it is a different one than I initially thought. So like, good trade for Bucks in that situation. Wait, yeah,
Yeah, so I mean,
Bucks.
he moves off 2 safeties and a corner and pulls back Zacchaeus, who had some spot performance for the Atlanta. Another D end who Weatherly, I think, was looked at as potential impact, not an impact, but a player from a free agency perspective, and then still maintains safety depth in terms of Landon Collins, Gilman, and Gillespie. So I think it's a good deal, especially for what Titans was trying to do.
So I actually love the idea of it's an awful contract at $9 million. Like, but I love the idea of having Landon Collins, because if I'm not mistaken, he played like 60% of his snaps as a linebacker last year, and like that's gonna lead to fantastic production for a safety. There's a couple of them in this league. Conveniently enough, Jeremy Chin, who is also moved in this, he's one of those that kind of sits sits closer to a linebacker than a safety, and where he typically lines up. Like those safeties are crazy valuable because they pick up so many extra tackles. And like Landon Collins, in my mind, he's probably the oldest of that type of safety. He's probably the most expensive in this league, but I still like it because he's significantly cheaper than a Jeremy Chin. just,
Yep.
in that sense. So I would spend the extra little bit of millions to get Landon Collins and just have him for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think the dependability is there, and I mean, in terms of production, I think Chin and Collins were pretty close last year. So um, it's just taking on the bigger contract. So you've got space, you freed up some space for it, so it's a good thing to do. And you've got optionality with him, Gilman, and the other pieces he has. So hey, the safety deals you were talking about, they're happening. People are
Weird
moving safeties.
Weirdly enough, if you would have asked me probably 2 weeks ago, like, what 3 safeties would you wanna have rostered on your team? Like, no no other questions asked. It probably would have been, like, Logan Ryan, Jeremy Chin, and Landon Collins. So kind of funny to see all of them move so, like, back to back. But,
Mhm.
like, I like to see it, especially seeing 2 of them move. Like, I I tip my hat to both of those traders because that's just a good trade. Like, it just looks fantastic. It is
Yeah,
like, good value assessment, like, okay, Chin is similar to Collins, but you probably would need to add more to Collins, even though he is the more noteworthy name, has been floated around as a quality player for longer. He isn't as valuable as, like, the super cheap, super young Jeremy Chin.
right. All right, that's all I have. What do you think, RJ? Cut it down to 40 minutes this time, or we need to find some ways to get it over 2 hours again?
No, I like it how we are. So I think, like I had mentioned before, I think the next thing that we look on is free agency. I don't know how much commentary we'll necessarily add to that until it is over, and by that time we'll be like in the draft section of our off season, which that is lots of hype. So I don't know if we will be doing a pod
I'm sure
every.
we'll do a couple here, but yeah, it's we'll have the combine, we'll get into free agency, and then we'll probably touch base before a couple times before the draft. Maybe we'll do a couple mock drafts like we did last year, but you know, it's that time. I think combine, if I remember correctly, starts in the next couple of days. So let's get into it.
It started today, but if I'm not mistaken, it was all the unimportant positions, the
Yeah, the wings.
non-fantasy relevant ones.
Yep. So, all right. Well, for those listening after the fact, thanks for listening. I saw we had a live viewer for a little bit there, but dropped off. Going against the State of the Union can have that kind of impact. But we knew what we were doing. So hopefully everyone's surviving their State of the Union drinking games. I hope you guys are enjoying this after the fact, and you guys have a fun rest of the week. We'll talk to you later.